Hello and welcome to the Comedy Slab Cobcast.
Codpiece. I dare you to put that in.
In fact, I'm wearing it now.
I thought you were smiling.
Oh dear. Right, should we try again? Hello and welcome to the Comedy Slab podcast. I'm Shane O'Connor. He's Adrian Lacey. The podcast that's so funny we even start laughing before we record it, although it is a kind of delirious kind of laugh that you get
nervous.
Yeah, when you don't really know what you're doing. We critique comedy if you've never caught up with us before, but we're not adverse to being critiqued ourselves, are we? We've been, I think, variously described as more than just two men talking, although the jury's out on that one. And also, we've been described as mean-spirited, which was quite nice. If you've not caught up with the podcast, we slab, as we call it, because we've turned it into a verb, haven't we? The comedy slab.
It's registered now.
It's always copyrighted. We get a comedy every week, radio or TV, or sometimes the internet as well, which we haven't done for a while, although I know there are sort of one or two out there. And we watch it, as you would if you were just sat at home in the sofa watching it, or on the sofa even. Sometimes you can sit in the sofa, but then
that's if your stuffing's gone.
You find that you have trouble breathing because the cushions get on your face, and it's a nightmare. You wake up screaming, as I very often do, trying to do the introduction to this podcast. Where did I get to? Oh yeah, we watch it first of all, and then we sit there and we watch it and we make notes, and then we get together and we talk about it. We'll play 3 clips through the podcast, and then we'll give it a score, 5 each, making a score out of 10. I think that's about it, isn't it, Adrian? Have I missed anything out?
Well, it sounds like we always give something 5 each. You mean out of 5 each? But yeah, I'm splitting hairs now. Who am I to split hairs I don't have?
Neither of us have an awful lot of hairs to split.
We haven't got 2 hairs to rub together, have we?
We've got 2 heads to rub together, though, so...
That's a bit kinky. Moving on.
Now, let me tell you what it is. It's a new ITV comedy called Kate and Koji. I think it's on about episode 5 as we're recording this. I did start to watch the wrong episode, but more of that later. And it's essentially it's a very old school kind of comedy sitcom set in a cafeteria in a seaside town. And stars Brenda Blethyn and the wonderful Jimmy Akimbola. And I say wonderful because I've admired his work before, and again more of that later. But I've got to tell you what you think. I thought no, that's not right. Is it?
No, what you think I thought.
Oh, okay. But before I do that, can I just mention something? Because I wanted last week to say I bought some stuff, and I wanted you to guess what I was going to do. And then we got sidetracked on something else, and it never happened. And I just wondered, because it's wonderful.
That often happens. And I was going to say I've caught up on Bill Burr, but that can wait.
Oh, have you?
I have. We don't want to forget a second time whatever it is.
This is far more important because you said you never caught. Bill Burr does. I think he's a wonderful podcast where it's just him. It's his stream of consciousness. He's an American comedian. He's been going for years. Probably to the right of the divide, if anywhere, politically. How did you catch up with him then? What happened?
I watched some of his stuff on YouTube. There's a full-length show, which I haven't got in front of me. I've forgotten the name of it. But I enjoyed it, but I could see a lot of Bill Hicks in the Intolerance. If people know the shock comic, perhaps wouldn't be so shocking if he was doing the same act today. Although, I don't know, maybe that's not fair. Sadly died about 1993. He was only 32, but already by 32 he'd been doing stand-up for half his life, literally. He'd started at 16. Starting young.
Which is incredible, isn't it, really?
Oh,
I think starting at 16, to have the... I mean, maybe he didn't, I don't know, I've not seen it, not heard it, but to have the maturity at 16 to be able to do something like stand-up, which I think requires a certain amount of maturity and presence, doesn't it, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you can get away without those things. In fact, I think he was taking over the class even then. And the teacher spoke to his parents about it because he was such a, he stole the stage from at least one of his teachers. But anyway, that aside, I wasn't as impressed as you are by the podcast. I kind of get saddened. I know I shouldn't expect the same kind of thing. You know, a podcast, which is, as you say, a stream of consciousness, as against finely honed jokes which have been taken around the world sometimes and polished to within an inch of perfection. That's a very different beast to someone sitting there with a microphone sort of ad-libbing. Yeah. I had the same disappointment when I heard Ricky Gervais, having watched The Office and really enjoyed it, to then listen to his show on, as it was then, XFM. And he was just, well, he was doing what radio types do, and we've been guilty of ourselves at various times, ad-libbing. But it's just, I suppose it's partly expectation. If you don't expect the stand-up act, then you're not going to be disappointed in the same way.
It's that thing, isn't it? Do you? And we struggle with this as well, because I mean, we record this as you would call it in the trade. We record this as live, so you know, pretty well what you're hearing now is the conversation as it happened and in sort of more or less real time. With, you know, what if there's any technical things, there's one or two bits and pieces that get edited out, or if we run over time, very often we'll edit stuff out.
Or if certain people, naming no names, have a couple of fluffs at the beginning, but I would never expose a colleague on that front.
There's nothing worse than having your fluff exposed, isn't there? That's
especially if it comes from your navel.
You know, there's one thing running into a room and go, look at my fluff, everybody, but for somebody else to go, look at his
I've
fluff.
I've seen your fluff.
Yes, I know what your fluff's all about.
I take exception to it.
All right, not off.
Yeah, not off.
But what I was going to say was, I think that editing process, I think is just because whoever we edit it everything is alternate weeks, isn't it? This, so you know, not only the choices, but we also edit it alternate weeks as well. And to me, that pair of ears listening to it before it goes out, to a degree, eradicates the majority of self-indulgence. That's the thing I think Bill Burr suffers from, is that there's no editing process, so it can become quite self-indulgent.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderfully smooth in a way I could never hope to be, because my brain doesn't work that way. But yeah, sometimes you are sitting there waiting for him to wait for his web browser to come up with the page he wants, and you think, is this the best use of my time? Is it the best podcast material going? The answer is no to both, I'm afraid, for me.
Okay, and did you see any of his stand-up? Did you like his stand-up?
I watched some of that on YouTube, and I did enjoy it, but once I'd got the act, it's a bit like me famously being a unilateralist, or whatever I'm called. When I watch one show of a series and I'm done, I've got the Bill Burr act. It's very polished. The audience are eating out of his hand. Respect to him, but I'm not in a rush to seek out more. And I don't mean to sound insulting by that, but it's a strong act, but it is what it is. Anyway, what did you get delivered?
I don't know if we've got time now. Have we got time to do this?
Or should we do it next week, you little tease?
I'll do it next week. Do it next week. And I won't tell you what I've been doing this week, but all I can tell you is I can still taste it.
I don't want to know. Were you exposing fluff? No. Well, you don't have to do anything else next week because you've got one in the can, haven't you? Except it's more my show next week. So
as they say, as they say. So I could do it the week after. Stay tuned for finding out what I bought.
If you're remotely interested, I am intrigued now.
To be honest with you, I'll have to send it back. It'll have gone off by the time we mention it, but never mind. Don't worry about that. Anyway, on to Kate and Koji, ITV comedy. Which, as we said, I think at the end of last week's podcast, is quite interesting because there was a stage where somebody quite senior from ITV was saying, we're not making comedy anymore because we've got Keith Lemon and that's enough for us, thanks.
Then I thought afterwards, when you said that last week, I thought during the week, was that the ultimate joke that we didn't get?
No, I think they were deadly serious. There was, because I mean, it was like an aside, you know, well, we've got enough with Celebrity Juice, so we're going to do it all on ITV too. That was the thrust of what they were saying, is they weren't going to commission any more ITV comedies. If they were, it was going to be on ITV2, and they were probably going to buy them in, and certainly we're going to make any. And but anyway, so I don't know what's happened. Somebody's got the sack, obviously. And the ship has done an about face, and off they've gone, and they've commissioned Kate and Cody for better or worse. I think, let me tell you what I think before we hear the first clip and get a bit of a flavour of it, and then we can actually hear what you really do think. I think you're not a fan. I think that you think it's very old-fashioned. I think you think it's very stereotypical. And I don't think you thought there were many gags in there. I think probably a 2.5. I would say 2 if it was me, but I'll say 2.5 for you because I know you have this inbuilt generosity that was beaten into you at boarding school when you were a child. Hello. Turned up on his motorbike.
I was bored at school, but it wasn't a boarding school.
Oh, that's it. I knew it was something like that.
That's the difference.
So yeah, that's roughly where I'm coming from. But before you peep. Before you say a word...
Well, I'm not going to. This side of the clip, yeah.
Shall we have a clip and then the other side? You can come back all guns blazing.
I certainly shall.
All right. First clip then. So I say Kate and Cody. What can I tell you? It's Brenda Blethyn's Café. She plays Kate. And as I mentioned before, Jimmy Akin Bowler plays Koji. And we're kind of getting to learn about the characters. And basically, Koji keeps coming in and sitting in the cafe, and he's just sitting there and he's doing work and listening to his iPod. And they're trying to ascertain what he's all about, kind of thing. But before that happens, Kate kind of, I don't know, loses her patience with him already. She's a bit upset that he's got a little bit of dregs of coffee in his cup. And she tells him that he's going to have to leave the cafe.
You're going to need to relocate to the job centre, maybe.
There's no point, because I can't work.
You can't work? Oh, have you got a medical condition, have you? One of them syndromes?
No. My problem isn't medical. I'm not allowed to work because...
You self-identify as a lazy person.
I'm an asylum seeker, okay? Legally, I'm not allowed to work, and if they catch me working, they'll reject my application and send me home.
And why's going home a problem?
I'd get killed. And I'd rather not be killed. Call me a snowflake.
Rain, hail and sleet. That's just walking from the van. Morning, Auntie.
Yeah, morning, handsome. Usual?
No. Cup of tea and some toast.
Toast? What happened to your bacon roll?
Gone off bacon. I watched the wrong documentary.
Oh, was it inside the abattoir? The one where they secretly strapped a GoPro onto that pig? Poxy BBC vegan propaganda.
So, what to say? What I should point out is is he a hero? Is he an anti-hero? The Koji of the title, or half the title, is sitting there beautifully turned out in a three-piece suit with a nicely tied tie, looks immaculate. I point that out because you might just have a certain visual sense if someone mentions being an asylum seeker. Of course, there are many different forms of asylum seekers. I haven't thought of a headline. I'm going to have to do it on the hoof. How about Kate and Koji and me? We get on all right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't expect that.
No, I like surprising you. But then the show itself, I mean, yes, it's an old form, but then so's theatre. And you wouldn't say, oh, if someone invited you to a West End show, you wouldn't immediately say, oh, that's an old form, I won't go. I mean, Ben Elton delivered a passionate defence of the classic art form as he sees it of the sitcom, which is, he was concerned it was dying because of us being awash with mockumentaries post The Office and so on. We've kind of rehearsed those arguments at various stages in various comedy slabs. So yeah, I haven't given up on the form. I'm not just saying this because a former BBC Sound colleague of mine is credited. Chris Healy's working on this. I'd just like to say hello to Chris if he's listening. We used to be side by side with our booms, if that's not an improper phrase to use in front of an innocent audience.
Pair of booms.
Indeed, that's what we were known as.
Yes.
So, what to say? I just, in spite of myself, I had certain, the mention of ITV comedy and me dusting off the old Stuart Lee line about ITV being the failed state of broadcasting, which still makes me raw. That aside, I actually thought it was well made. I thought it was well scripted. Certainly, it's a couple of very experienced writing hands in Guy Jenkin and Andy Hamilton.
I know.
Yeah,
I mean,
they haven't done a few shows.
And again, it's that. Quite recently we slabbed one of Andy Hamilton's works, didn't we? With
old Harry's Game.
Old Harry's Game, yeah. Set in hell. Which again it was a radio comedy, but again I suppose you could say was they do tend to be the old form, don't they, in radio more than in TV. But this surprised me as much as it did you by the sound of it, because I think that I was sat there with my arms folded mentally,
right,
going, right, come on then, entertain me. Despite the cast as well. I mean, you mentioned the writing partnership there, who are well seasoned. But you're looking at the cast. They've not gone light on the cast, have they? Really?
No. But did you know who the writers were before your first viewing?
No, but I did before. And I'd never have guessed it. I would never have guessed it, because normally you can tell the kind of gag, the way they're layered, the way they're structured, you can tell, can't you, sometimes? You think, oh, that's very similar to something else that they've written.
It certainly, it felt quite fresh, really. And, I was trying to remember how you got on with Old Harry's Game, but sometimes Andy Hamilton stuff, it can feel a little bit tired to me, or a bit samey, but this felt fresh. This felt like it could be a couple of people just starting out in a good way,
and maybe, and I mean this in a loving way, Andy, if you're listening. It does, I think, benefit from him not being in it, because I mean because he's an actor as well. He will write parts and he will actually appear in it. But I think it's good not to have his face and his voice in it, because I think then you would view it differently. I think maybe you would probably hold it to a higher standard.
Certainly, you're more detached from it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it benefits from him actually not having too big a fingerprint on it, I think, really.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if did you recognise Blake Harrison, who was Medium Dave?
Only at a sort of half subliminal level, but I couldn't. No, are you going to name something that he's been in?
He was one of the lads from the Inbetweeners,
right? Which
but
I've only seen.
You wouldn't recognise him. I would forgive you for not recognising him, because I thought, I know him. Where do I know him from? But he looks as if he's got a bit of a beard thing going on, a bit of a stubble thing. His hair had changed completely as well, and he changed his voice. And you wouldn't pick him out of a lineup, would you? Really, I wouldn't have thought.
I haven't seen enough In-Betweeners to pick anyone out too much. Maybe apart from the... is it Greg Davis in that one?
He's the teacher, isn't he? He's the teacher. And I mentioned the head of this, the wonderful Jimmy Akingbola, who... And I don't know if you've caught up with this. Have you ever seen Rev?
I have, yeah. We should put that on the slab one week.
Do you remember Mick, who was one of the waifs and the strays that used to come round to the vicarage? And he was
he would call the vicar Vicarage.
No, he was the other guy. He was the white guy, wasn't he? Vicarage.
Vicarage.
There was a guy called Mick who was very starey and quite obviously had some kind of mental health issues.
Right.
And that was Jimmy Akingbola who played that. Right. And again, you wouldn't, what a great actor. You wouldn't pick him from one to the other. And an interesting, lovely little fact, I thought, and I saw this, I thought, I've got to tell Adrian this. His brother, Jimmy Akingbola's brother, Sola Akingbola, is the head percussionist in Jamiroquai.
Oh, wow.
Now, how funky a band do you have to be? Not only do you have a percussionist, but you have a head percussionist.
Head percussionist, yeah, gosh.
So, so there you go. So it comes from a musical family, I guess. in that sense. But yeah, and so you look at the cast and you look at the stuff that they've done before. They've not gone lightweight on it, have they? Really, I don't say they've. They've weighed in.
Maybe that's why they head of comedy, or the ex-head of comedy. Maybe it was a double bluff to leave all the rival TV networks napping, and they come in with something with a bit of poke behind it, as it were. A pleasant surprise, and I was LOLing, laughing out loud at various points. I mean, not falling about, but I don't think it's quite that kind of thing. But it's a nice, warm comedy, and probably it's a good time for it to be launched, isn't it, as we speak during lockdown?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. Although I was looking at some trails on ITV today, and they were doing like a season trailer. So the stuff that's coming up on ITV for the summer season, presumably. And they got a little bit of clips on this, and they're going quite light on it. They're not. I get the impression that they're not really sure, but somebody said, "I'm not sure, but I like it. I don't know why I like it. Let's take a punt on it." That's the feeling I get in the way that they're advertising it, which again is no bad thing. It's just, but I'd just like more people to maybe see it and to have a look and give it a go. Really, what did you think about you? You mentioned the fact that it transpires. I mean, the story is and the gag is, and maybe this is one of the things where perhaps it doesn't work over a full series. The one premise is that he's a doctor back in his own country, which I would place as Nigeria. I don't know.
Yeah, I checked in his bio. If I had to guess from the rhythms of the speech, but of course he was born in Plaistow in East London, but to Nigerian parents, and the character obviously doesn't follow that the character has to be Nigerian, but from the rhythms of the speech, I was going to guess it was a Nigerian
That's
character.
the accent he's doing, isn't it? Definitely,
yeah.
I mean, he that isn't his natural voice by any stretch, but. Yeah, because when he's Mick in Rev, I think it is a Cockney accent that he uses on that. So, right. But I don't know whether that's his choice. I don't know whether they said to him, "Look, Jimmy, this guy's from somewhere in Africa, which is
Africa land,
which is quite a few centimetres to go for, isn't it? Really,
it is. It's a continent rather than just a little nation.
But there is a thing in Africa, isn't there? And I've heard this said before that there is a lot of Mickey taking of the Nigerians.
Is that so?
Because they're perceived to be that they feel that they're posher than everybody else,
right? And
everybody else is a little bit beneath them, and that is a kind of a running gag among certain African countries that he's Nigerian, he's going to be a bit snooty kind of thing, and that maybe that's what they went for in that sense, really. I mean, does that work for you? Did that work for you at all? I mean, the character, believable, Koji?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what you just said about how Nigeria is perceived within Africa, but I thought it was a very solid character, and I loved the dry wit, and that was believable. And it's working on a number of levels, but it's he's doing the Times crossword. It's quite clear. I mean, doctors by definition are educated. You don't get to be a doctor just by I don't know, doing the Sun crossword, perhaps.
No.
Is that a terrible thing to say? What were you going to say? You sound like, but you're poised.
No, it's just when you said about some wonderful lines, and he was saying about how much he gets. I can't remember how much he said he got to live on a week.
38 quid or so,
something like that. Yeah, and he said, that's for my accommodation and my food, and he said, and I just blow the rest on crack and hookers.
Oh yeah,
there is that kind of deadpan delivery, isn't there, of that sort of those sort of lines as well. Here's an interesting one for you. I don't know what you made of this. At one point, this is quite early on in the whole thing, and it was kind of apropos nothing really. And I thought, I've got to ask Adrian about this, because we've talked many times about old sitcoms where anything external from the studio would have been done on film, and it was very jarring to see the difference between VT and film.
Videotape.
Videotape and film. And there's one point where Brenda Blethyn's character just walks outside to go and put some cones outside the café. And we cut to an exterior shot of her putting the cones out, delivering one line, and then back to a studio shot of her walking back in again.
Mm.
And it was like, no, and if I hadn't been slabbing it, if I'd have just been watching it, I wouldn't probably have even noticed. Did you notice it at all? Did you see
I did. I clocked it, and I thought, as I think you're saying, it's extremely smooth.
Yeah. But I didn't know why. Was it just to prove they could do it? I don't
know. They had to go a long way, all the way down to some seaside somewhere. I didn't clock where the studio was. I mean, I made that terrible, you'll hate me for this, made that terrible metropolitan assumption that it was a London studio, but it doesn't follow. But still...
you should have known exactly where it was filmed.
I should have done.
Very disappointed in you now, because I think I'm pretty certain this was your old stomping ground, wasn't it? Wasn't it Elstree where you used to work?
I did at one point. Have you checked that?
Yeah, it was BBC Studio Works Limited.
I saw that credit. Yeah,
formerly BBC Studios and Post Production. It's there. They've got two sound stages, haven't they, at Elstree? And this was they used the one for it there. Yeah, it was all the internal stuff. The external stuff, I'm trying to find out. I made a note of where it was.
Somewhere by sea.
It was Kent. I got a little bit annoyed actually because it's set in a fictional town of Seagate, isn't it?
Yes, with its mashed up road sign. We must get onto our second clip. What were you annoyed by, Padre?
Well, Seagate. Come on, can you come on?
Well, so there's a place called Seaford, and
yeah.
Okay.
I didn't like that. I didn't.
Right. Well, while you're thinking of a good, convincing town name,
yeah,
let's get on the clip number 2 of 3.
All right. Still set in the cafe, as you would imagine, because they don't really go outside, other than when Brenda goes out and puts the cones outside, and we see one external shot in the whole thing. Never really got my head around that one. Still in the cafe. And we've already been introduced to a character called Medium Dave, who I mentioned a little bit earlier on, played by Blake Harrison, who was the taller of the lads in between, as if you're trying to place him. And he's tried to have a bit of a conversation with Koji, and he's not. They're not really getting on like a house on fire, as it were. But he does find out that he's a doctor. And so a few scenes later, or a few sort of bits and pieces later, they find out that Medium sat in the cafe, and he's found out he's a doctor, and his mate Nick arrives. Medium Dave's mate Nick arrives.
Oh, a quick correction before the emails flood in.
Yeah.
It's Medium Dan.
Oh, sorry, Dan.
Half the time he's just called Medium, so you could be forgiven for forgetting.
Medium Dan, yeah, sorry. I think his Dave was a character name but I could be wrong, so I'll probably not mention that, otherwise the emails will flood in. Medium Dan. His mate Nick arrives, and they're trying to get Koji to do an on-the-spot diagnosis, and they kind of trick him, sort of, into doing one.
In my opinion, Nick, this is a cracked bone. Most likely a hairline fracture of the ulna.
A hairline fracture of the ulna?
Oh, I'm so sorry, is that not correct?
It's probably an inflammation of the biceps tendon. Show me. Does this hurt? I'll take that as a yes. Anabolic steroid abuse can cause tendon damage. Do you abuse steroids?
Oh, yeah. I've always been tonk up top, but I'm working on my quads to get proper tonk all over.
In the long run, you have the choice of being proper tonk all over with liver damage or less tonk with a working liver.
I'm going to have to go for proper tonk all over with the liver damage.
Evolution thanks you. Now, if you'll excuse me.
So, Nick, how's your dad?
Okay.
How's the dog?
Yeah, fine.
How's that weird lump you were telling me about?
Holy Mother of God, do you not have doctors in this town?
We do, but there's a shortage. It could take weeks to get a GP appointment.
I'll look at it on one condition, that you then leave me alone. Go to hospital as soon as possible or you will die.
Die?
Mm-hmm. That's a joke, right?
No, it's a DVT, a blood clot.
Not every show can get a laugh out of go to the hospital immediately or words to that effect or you will die. Mm. But, hey, we bite our thumbs and laugh in the face of death. Did you know, maybe you did, because our listeners won't know, but you emailed me these clips earlier in the week with a reference to Kojak. Had you looked up where Koji's name supposedly comes from?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you might like this, but hey, look, this is what writers write, so you can write anything, obviously, if you create a character. Koji took the name of his brother. Kojak, Colombo, Quincy, Cagney, Lacey, Akindele. You can see where it's going, because he had a passport with which he could leave the country. Still not naming which African country it is, although we've made our own particular
assumptions.
Assumptions, yeah. The brother, also a doctor. You can really have some fun with a character, can't you? A sort of off-stage extra character who never appears, or not appeared yet. The brother is also a doctor who was struck off and subsequently, quote, disappeared. Koji is actually Rocky Rockford, named by his father, who, surprise, surprise, loved American detective TV shows. Well, I just throw that in.
I do like that, I must admit. That to me, that is pure Andy Hamilton, isn't it? Really, the kind of.
I didn't want to assume it was him rather than Guy Jenkin, but
yeah, doesn't that sound like Andy to you?
It's certainly compatible with the Andy, and I don't know that I know his stuff quite as closely as you do.
I don't know. It just gets got that kind of feel from my perspective, but I do. It's just there's something. It's quite gentle, but it's got like a little bit of a nippy bite to it as well, I think.
There's something political going on, isn't there? If you scratch, you don't have to scratch too far beneath the surface. Yeah. Making a point about how we treat asylum seekers.
The curious thing is that I had exactly this conversation with a guy from Iraq when I was working in Coventry, and I had this. And do you know, I feel really bad that I can't remember what he did. But he was a professional. He was a lawyer or something or other. He was a professional. And this was the first time I'd never really had a conversation with an asylum, because we talk about asylum seekers in this country when we mean economic migrants, which is a very different thing. This is somebody who was fleeing from persecution in Iraq because he wasn't the right type of Muslim, and as I say, this guy was a professional, and I had no idea. This is the first time I ever came across this idea that the asylum seekers come to this country and they operate in this ridiculous situation where, exactly as he says, we give them a paltry sum. And this bloke, I think he'd been in the country for about 4 years, and he was climbing the walls with the Home Office and saying, please, give me a substantive position here that I can then work and I can then put some value back. No, until you've got to go through, and you know what the wheels of government are like, is it? And so, and if somebody said that to me, I say, you're making it up. It was, what a ridiculous system to have. But that is the system, isn't it?
It's Kafkaesque. But one can only assume certain political parties are never backwards when it comes to reminding us supposedly we're the fourth or fifth biggest economy in the world, depending on how you measure these things. But they're not joining the dots. If we're that wealthy, how can we say we can't afford to pay asylum seekers more than 38 quid a week? And they even spell it out, don't they? Medium carves it up into about just over a £5 a day, which makes sense of the doctor spending all day with one cup of tea. And even the Brenda Blethyn character, Kate, says that's a balmy system. Who thought that up, or which idiot? So it is exactly as you say. I can only assume it's meant to deter asylum seekers, but asylum seekers are seeking asylum. It's a legally recognised status.
And the interesting thing is, I read a few reviews after just to see where I very often do. I'll kind of like hunt down what other people are saying about it once I've kind of made my own mind, just to see where I am in the zeitgeist. And I read a review by somebody called Amar Kalia, who wrote in your favourite paper, The Guardian, and they were saying they thought it was distasteful. Was the headline, as it were, and then went on to mention, I mean, what a ridiculous premise that this guy as a doctor is going to do spot diagnoses for food and drink.
Mm.
And as you just said, if you're living on a fiver,
what else are you going to do? Well, absolutely.
It's all about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? Where you are on the pyramid. But I mean, and I thought, what a stupid thing to say in a review, to criticise it for, and to say that what a plot hole that was, because this guy's a. And you think you've completely missed the point of what it's.
You'd have thought someone writing in my favourite paper, as you call it, and I don't actually agree with everything it comes out with. You'd have thought they would have got it, but also equally, it's a surprising thing. And I'm going to have to reappraise ITV's comedy division, because you would expect this perhaps to appear on Channel 4 if it wanted to make a political point. I don't know that I would expect it on the BBC, although they might want to think they're right on. But I am surprised, pleasantly surprised to see it on ITV. Is that a terrible thing to say?
No, I think it's a really astute thing to say, because we've said this so many times, and I don't really know that we've ever had the answer as to why it is like this. But if you made this comedy on BBC, if you made this comedy on Channel 4, if you made it on Netflix, it would become a different animal on all of those different broadcasters, wouldn't it? I mean, there's no question. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's the underlying ethos. I don't know if it's the people involved. I don't know if it's just the methods that they use to put these things together. But it would come out differently, wouldn't it?
Yeah, hard to say how necessarily, but I would think it's ultimately, and it's probably a vague term, but generally it's the culture of each of those companies, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess
things are a product of the culture that they're born out of. But, I mean, that begs the question. It would be interesting, but you can never do that experiment. I mean, very occasionally a show will transfer from the BBC to ITV, but so occasionally, I'm struggling to remember one now. There's one in the back of my mind.
There was one with Slab, wasn't there?
Birds of a Feather transferred.
Yes, it did.
I actually worked on it for the BBC, but I can't remember which way. Did it go to ITV?
It did.
BBC?
It went from BBC to ITV, didn't it? Yeah, that's well remembered. Yeah, I thought there was one we'd done as well, but I'm not sure.
There may well be. But I mean, it's less surprising when an act like there's a double act classic 70s into early 80s Morecambe and Wise transferred from the BBC to ITV, and that didn't work particularly. And I think that's probably partly where our lowered and perhaps now unfair expectations of ITV comedy come from for people of a certain age, such as us.
I mean, it's interesting we say this about ITV comedy, and I mean, this is just top of my head, so I'm sure there are better examples, but Rising Damp is a good one that springs to mind, which of course was made by Yorkshire Television for the ITV network when it was a much more sort of disparate. It was like a group of regions, wasn't it? More than it is now, rather than just like a blanket ITV thing. Which I think I think that was part of the problem that it has now, is that it is too much of a big blob rather than a group of like-minded companies with separate identities. Which I think was London Weekend Television used to make some great comedies, didn't they, in their time, and it was quite interesting. I mean, as I say, Rising Damp is the one that springs to mind. Ones that get a bad rap, and it's actually mentioned in this Guardian review, and I thought, I wonder if they would do that, and they came to. They said at worst it brings to mind the offensive stereotyping of love thy neighbour and mind your language. Now, I don't know about you, but I mean, my love thy neighbour was a bit derivative, and it was kind of the same episode every week. I even remember that as a kid and thinking, it's a bit. I found it a bit dull. Although people have challenged how offensive it was, because they were both offensive to each other, weren't they? As I recall, the black neighbour and the white neighbour were as bad as each other, and it was the two wives that we're constantly trying to get them to be on be nice to each other and get on the right path kind of thing. But Mind Your Language, I think, was one of the, I remember as a kid loving that, and I think it was one of the most. That was a London Weekend Television production, actually. And I just think, in the haze of revisionist history through political correctness, I think we've written off some of these kind of things. Isn't most comedy about stereotypes? Isn't that what it is?
That's a big question. I don't think so. I mean, isn't this show trying to invert that?
Well, not really, because I suppose he's a stereotype in a way. She's most definitely a stereotype in a way. They even gave her a line at the start. There are 4 things I in life I hate: scroungers, foreigners, doctors, and posh people. I must admit, I love the thing when she was going through the post and she was going, "No, I will not rescue this donkey." I thought it was quite funny. But I mean, she is a stereotype writ large, and you kind of think that is the whole point of comedy, is that it's about caricatures, it's about stereotypes. It's taking a stereotype and writing it big.
Well, I think yes and no. I've got a feeling she's going to try and surprise us. It's kind of implied, and I could be wrong. Maybe they're trying to wrong foot us, but it's kind of implied that they're going to come round and be busy mates. I mean, there's already a kind of resolution. It's not too much of a spoiler alert at the end of this first episode. Anyway, while you're gulping your so-called purple drink, I think we should get on to the third and final clip, if you would like to set the scene.
Oh, well, so you don't think comedy is about stereotypes then, no?
Yeah, but sometimes, I tell you what I was thinking of, but it might be stereotypical of a white guy trying to think of black characters. He says slightly tongue-in-cheek, but the spin-off from Till Death Us Do Part, In Sickness and in Health, actually it may still have been under the brand.
In Sickness and in Health, yeah, I remember,
the gay black home help sort of character.
Yeah, I can't remember. Marigold was the he used to call him, didn't he? Who is the actor in real life? He's absolutely storming it in the States. He's got his own drama on. I think he's on CBS. It's where he's the head of a fire station, because he does a pretty mean American accent.
Bronx,
but yeah, he's doing as well as Hugh Laurie did out in the States. Forgive me, I can't remember his name. Yeah, go on anyway. So what were you going to say about that?
Oh, I thought that was, but it might be making your point rather than mine. I thought that was inverting stereotypes a bit. I mean, I don't actually like it when stereotypes are deliberately and very obviously inverted. That just looks like a writer's device that's sort of a bit clunky and sticks out like a sore thumb sometimes.
Is it an inverted stereotype though, or is it just not a stereotype? That I've been thinking about this all week, and I was trying to think. If you think of Rising Damp, you think of the character of Rigsby. He's a stereotype. He's the mean-fisted landlord who won't spend anything. He's a horrible landlord, won't spend anything on his tenants. It's a stereotypical idea of that. On the buses were stereotypical Jack the Lad, wanted to not do very much work, bit of skivers. In the 1970s Britain, there were stereotypes. Everything about comedy is about the exaggeration of human traits. And so to say, this is a stereotype, I think, well, yeah, because that's really what comedy is all about. It's about stretching the fabric of personality and making it into something that is large enough for us all to kind of to relate to.
It's certainly about identifiable. I mean, you could call them archetypes, but that might just end up being another word for stereotypes. But I think you stereotypes me, and do frequently, as a Guardian reader. You said at the top of this show that I was going to find it stereotypical. So that's you pigeonholing me as a Guardian reader, agreeing with the column that I haven't actually read, that I don't agree with.
But I only do that because you say that I hate the Guardian, or you say I read the Daily Mail. That's the only reason I say it.
I'm stereotyping you.
Yeah. So mine
revenge.
is a kind of reverse. Mine's a stereotype boomerang.
Mine's a monotype, which is half a stereotype, just on the left side. Anyway,
mine's a 5.1 surround type then.
Oh, get you and your fancy ways and your superior wealth. Can you get us onto the third and final clip before one of us dies of tedium or old age or both?
Stereotypitis.
Yes.
The final clip, I mean, it's a simple one. It's kind of, you're probably seeing it coming if you're sitting there watching the episode. We're still in the cafe. Kate offers Koji a deal.
Right, so here's the deal. I'm prepared to admit that you marginally increased footfall in my cafe this morning. So, if you're prepared to give medical advice on a daily basis, I'll give you free food and beverages, excluding hot chocolate.
I need to consider all my options.
Options? You haven't...
Any chance of a cup of tea for a hard-working postal operative, Kate?
Course there is. You give me £1.20, I'll hand you a cup of tea.
When your mum run this place, she always gave the postman a cup of tea.
Yeah, well, there was only the one of you then.
The frothy coffee gave me a free macchiato.
Yeah, well, the frothy coffee can stick its macchiato up its macchiato. No, I don't want faster broadband. Yes, I will let this donkey die. And no, I don't want free delivery of a lobster, grape and port wine pizza.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on that particular one as well. Yeah, what to say? It's certainly got a very warm heart. I think the fact that it's got a political edge to it is interesting. I do wonder, notwithstanding the fact that I'm a Unitarian and at the moment don't see myself, I've never managed to find the time to watch entire series the way you do. I am curious to know where they go with it, because if it stays inside the cafe, apart from the occasional trip outside to put a bollard down or something of that nature, she needs to read her contract, obviously, our favourite Alan Partridge callback. Apart from that, I mean, if it's going to stay in the cafe, it's going to have to be fairly interesting in other ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm stereotyping it as a kind of show that will stay in one place. Maybe it travels around, but where do you go with it? I am sort of interested, but it's a tough one, though.
And is that because you can't get out of the cafe? Because we wouldn't, after 3 series of Porridge, be saying, do you know, I mean, they needed to get out of the prison more. That was the problem with that, was that, you know, and I'm not criticising you for it. I'm just saying, is that, do we feel that? Because I feel the same. I think you're absolutely right. But do we feel that because we can get out of the sea?
But even in the prison, you went to the landing, you went to the obviously Fletcher's cell, the Ronnie Barker character, and then with the one we slabbed, they went to the governor's office.
Yeah.
And even the governor's office has got another room which became significant in the plot. So, okay, they're staying within the bounds of the prison for obvious reasons. Or even then, he occasionally goes home, doesn't he? Or maybe that's later series or the spin-offs.
No, he does have a conjugal visit, doesn't he? He goes for the weekend.
With the leather jacket. That's some detail that's stuck with me. So, well, good luck to them. But I mean, you know, they're not sort of lacking, as we've said, in experience. So if a pair of writers could ever pull something interesting out of a static setup, which of course feels ever more theatrical if they do actually stay there. It's closer to being like a stage set, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then good on them, and they're certainly they've got the chops for it. Although I'm bound to throw in that one of your favourite shows was written by the same combo, Guy Jenkin and Andy Hamilton, namely, of course, Outnumbered. Just twisting that knife. Did we say it's a Hatrick production? So Jimmy Mulville gets an exec producer credit on that, as he has on so many well-received shows.
Big shout out to a very talented man as well. The music by Phil Pope, of course, who works with Jimmy Mulville.
Oh no, I wrote a big note there, pun not intended. Music. What did you make of this very well-known tune, "I Only Want to Be With You"? Do we think that's a clue as to where we're going to end up between Kate and Koji?
Yeah, I never really thought of it like, excuse me, like that. your reviewer in The Guardian.
Reviewer.
It went straight over.
Can you lay off that? It's not my reviewer.
Went straight over their poor little head because they said even the Baker Street style saxophone melody. So they obviously hadn't figured out what the tune was.
That's a bit lame, isn't it?
And panning opening credits feels like a throwback to Only Fools and Horses, which I'm surprised they'd even managed to see. But there you go. I'd never really thought about that. You're very deep, aren't you, these days? Subliminal messages in the theme tune. I don't see it going down that avenue. I really don't. I don't.
But why would you choose a tune that is very identifiable to? More than one generation, because it was revived decades later. Yeah, Dusty Springfield first, and then Eurythmics stroke Annie Lennox.
I'll be honest with you, that was one of my annoyances, was the calling it Seagate and the theme tune. I didn't like. I would change both of those, but minor things, aren't they, really, I suppose. But yeah, I'll tell you what, being the completest of the group, I will... I really enjoyed it, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch I did watch episode 4 for the first 10 minutes by mistake until I realised my error.
Did that give any clues? I mean, I suppose you shouldn't give too much away here, but did you... Was it the fact that you were struggling to keep up with it that was the giveaway, or...?
Yeah, I kind of thought, this is all leapt in a bit quick, hasn't it, really? What's going on here?
They're assuming too much knowledge.
They're assuming I know a lot about this. And,
they're assuming you can find episode 1 of series 1.
Yeah, so... but I will. I'll go back and I'll have a shufty and I'll let you know whether your suspicions are correct. I'll probably have to tell you outside of the recording, otherwise people will be saying, "Oh, what a spoiler! What a spoiler!"
Yeah.
I've got to share this one with you. I said I'd go and have a look and see what other people say about these things before we do the numbers for this one. On the Internet Movie Database, there's a wonderful review that said, "I thought I would give this a try, but I didn't expect it to be so racist." Which I presume their definition of racist is somebody speaks harshly to somebody who isn't white. I'm guessing anyway. I'm surprised it got by the censor. The way the cafe owner treats her customers has much to be desired. It's not a real cafe, just so you know that. There really was no need to be so rude for cheap laughs. I will watch the second episode to see if it improves. In my opinion, the writers need to update on what is funny. And the final line... Now, bearing in mind, this episode was 22 minutes long, right? And the final line says, "I only watched 20 minutes of this."
If they'd only stuck with it for another couple. Yeah, but that particular review is signed by the ex-head of comedy of ITV, who said that Keith Lemon had all the laughs he needed.
Yeah. I love it. I thought it was great.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Come on, then. Should we... Numbers?
Yes. I think it's your turn to go first, isn't it? Buy me another 30 seconds.
Okay.
Hancock's half hour.
I'm going to give it, because rarely have I been so surprised and pleasantly surprised and impressed from something that I didn't know anything about and just went into there and thought, "Oh, okay, I'll give it a bash." For that reason, I'm going to give it a 4.
I thought you were heading that way, but I wouldn't have guessed. I wouldn't have guessed outside of this particular show, hearing how warmly you'd received it.
I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I thought it just like you say, it's got a good heart, and a good heart these days is hard to find. Thanks, Fergal. Cheers, mate.
Mr. Sharky, ka-ching.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm pleased for you. I don't feel I'm too far out of tune with that, although I'm half a point behind you. Half a point.
Hancock's half a point.
Yes, indeed. 3.5 regular listeners will know is a kind of default of mine, but it's a flattering default. Why couldn't I quite give it a 4? I don't quite know, answering my own question, but I suppose I'm not as excited about it as you, and I have got that disease whereby I don't seek out loads and loads of episodes, but I enjoy living through you. So if you have more, if you put the time in on my behalf, I'd be very interested to know what you make of the rest of the series. You can save yourself a few minutes on episode 4 by the sound of things, but
so lazy. You are so lazy. You're a vicarious
It's not laziness.
comedy watcher.
It's not laziness. It's laziness.
Anyway, come on, don't keep me in suspenders.
Oh, well, I prefer you that way, but that's all a bit Sid James. Well, that's not a million miles off, considering what I'm going to put on the slab for next week. Your homework, should you choose to accept, as if you have a choice, is actually someone else from the carry-ons of yesteryear, although not in a carry-on context. They're actually in a radio context. And later in their career on the radio, I mean, not incredibly late, but later than I would have thought, they were still doing BBC Radio. I mean, it's unlikely to be anyone other than BBC Radio in this country, because they are the prime sponsors of comedy. These days it appears on BBC Radio 4 Extra. It just went out as we speak. Well, as you'll hear this when the podcast drops, it's effectively last week, the previous week. Did you want to take a punt? I mean, you could go through the entire roll call of male members
Kenneth
of
Williams? Carry-ons.
It's not, but keep going. It's of that stature. You should be there very quickly.
Oh.
I thought you were going to do a...
Not Frankie Howard. No, he only did one.
Why not Frankie Howard?
Because he only did one carry-on, didn't he, I think?
Well, that still gives him the... Okay, I made it sound like he's in every carry-on. Forgive me. I thought he'd done more than one. Anyway, it matters not. It is Frankie Howard, but under that title, the name of the show is his name, complete with misspelt Howard, which is quite deliberate. We'll talk about that next week. And it all sounds a bit Hancock-esque, because in this episode, it's Series 2, Episode 4 of the series, just called Frankie Howard. He joins a local literary group. Sounds like fun already.
Love it.
So that is your homework. You'll find that on BBC Sound, certainly within the UK, and hopefully on BBC.com outside, with a bit of luck.
Okay, so that's the homework for next week. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed the Comedy Slab podcast and you think, I'd like to go back and listen to some of the previous episodes, they can only be better than this, because now presumably they're running out of steam as they head up the tracks.
I am at this time of night.
As we head to our 100th episode. I can't believe that. It's incredible, isn't it? You can find us on the normal places where you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We've also got a little bit of a thing going on YouTube as well. The best thing to do is to just put in Comedy Slab, and you'll find us, generally all one word, and you'll find us in all the best locations.
Yes, we are at Comedy Slab, one word, funnily enough, who knew, of course, on Twitter and also on Facebook. The page is at Comedy Slab. If you could like the latter and follow us on the former, and you will keep your finger on the pulse of comedy. It's quality, not quantity, in terms of what we tweet and retweet and that kind of thing.
So it only remains for us to say thank you very much for listening. Thanks for being with us, and we will be back next time. For my part, I should be heading off now to go and sit in my local café, pretend I'm a doctor, just to see whether anybody wants me to have a look at anything unusual and knobbly.
You're not looking at anything of mine that fits that description.
Everything of yours is unusual and knobbly. What are you on about?